Welcome to the Trump Breaking News Network, your daily source for up-to-the-minute Trump news. Join us today and every day. Here's today's news.
This is TBNN.
We interrupt this video to bring you a special announcement. We will continue with your video after this short announcement. There is a massive boycott with YouTube and its advertisers happening right now. This boycott threatens our existence, as well as the entire YouTube channel database. You can do a search on Google to confirm this boycott. We urge you to help by supporting our channel with a $1 donation, just $1, to help offset our growing expenses. Our staff is working diligently to keep you informed and up to date on events and intel that you have grown accustomed to receiving. Our staff produce over 70 videos on a daily basis in English and in Spanish. This is a tremendous undertaking. This is why we use a computerized voice, because of the massive amount of information we provide for you. We accept PayPal donations, and our donation link is below in our description. When the boycott is over, we'll let you know. This is a serious situation for YouTube and its advertisers. If you appreciate our channel and the intel that we provide for you, then please consider this much needed $1 donation. I want to personally thank you in advance for your support. Victory of the light. And now, here is your scheduled video.
Trump, we're not going into Syria. Is Trump disrupting the Cabal'S plan for a new world order? By Arjun Walia. Donald Trump has announced that the United States will not be going into Syria to intervene after the recent chemical gas attack that, the U.S. claims, was carried out by President Bashar Al Assad on his own people. Yet Assad, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Italian President Sergio Mattarella are calling this a false flag attack. Putin recently held a joint press conference with Mattarella in Moscow, in fact, where he revealed, "We have reports from multiple sources that false flags like this one, and I cannot call it otherwise, are being prepared in other parts of Syria, including the southern suburbs of Damascus. They plan to plant some chemical there and accuse the Syrian government of an attack." You can read more about that in an article we recently published that goes into more detail, as well as watch a clip of that conference, here. According to Michael Goodwin from the New York Post, who interviewed Trump, "We're not going into Syria," he told me yesterday in an exclusive interview. "Our policy is the same, it hasn't changed. We're not going into Syria." According to ABC News, President Trump said the United States is not going into Syria and that he believes the situation would be better in the country had Obama taken action, in an interview with Fox News. Why, this is something we've never seen before. Over decades and decades of war and political turmoil, problems have arisen in a number of countries, the best examples being the ones in the Middle East, where the threat of terrorists is constantly pushed out to the public. The result of this war on terror has been a heightened national security state, one where our rights are constantly stripped away to the point where we now have mass surveillance. There is a lot of evidence that these attacks are indeed false flags, carried out by Western intelligence agencies' interests in order to justify the invasion of other countries and install governments that better serve the interests of the U.S. and their allies. These attacks have been happening for a long time, and each time, the U.S. has intervened to play the role of the hero. So, what's going on here? Trump did state that Syrian dictator Bashar Al Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians. Using a deadly nerve agent, Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack. Source: There is more evidence supporting the idea that this was a false flag event than otherwise. The evidence showing that it was done by Bashar comes in the form of a mainstream media news anchor saying that they have reports or intelligence. On the false flag terrorism side, we have documents, primary sources, whistleblowers, and more. But the fact that Trump has decided not to intervene goes against the entire purpose of false flag terrorism, which leads me to believe that there is a battle going on right now between governments within the government. That being said, it is also confusing that he did confirm that this was an attack carried out by Bashar. Given his position and the circles he runs in, you would think he knows about false flag terrorism. During the election run he stated that ISIS was created by the US, so what makes him hold his tongue here? Perhaps he had some intel that we are not aware of. The fact that Trump has decided not to intervene is great news for those who believe these acts are a result of false flag terrorism, part of a plan that's been laid out for a long time to destabilize multiple countries. That plan was leaked by former four-star General Wesley Clark, who was the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe of NATO, in an interview with Democracy Now! Source. And the evidence doesn't stop there. If you'd like to learn more, I explore this idea more thoroughly in some of the articles linked below. Another Syrian chemical weapons attack just happened, the final false flag before a full U.S. intervention? Putin, the chemical attack in Syria was a false flag, more are being prepared in Syria. The Russian president says something about the New World Order that Western media won't air. Assad's top political advisor says U.S. missile strike killed the people fighting terrorists. White House press secretary slips up and admits U.S. plans to destabilize Syria. Evidence shows the Pentagon trained Syria's al-Qaeda rebels in the use of chemical weapons. The demonization of Trump and what's to come as a result of not intervening in Syria. Donald Trump was and still is completely vilified by mainstream media, most members of which were in the pockets of the Clinton administration, as WikiLeaks cables proved, so that should come as no surprise. At the same time, it's important to understand why he was demonized by mainstream media. Trump has gone up against Big Pharma and fraudulent science put out by the EPA, made some interesting comments about 9/11, stating that planes could not have done what they did, and the terrorist organizations that have been created by the U.S. government, and much more. This caught the attention of activists around the world who have been creating awareness about these issues for a long time. His calling out of mainstream media also contributed to his anti-establishment label. These organizations are government organizations, and governments have strong ties to mainstream media, controlling what stories they cover and how they cover them. This is a great quote by historian Richard Dolan that sums it up perfectly. It is important to understand why Trump was demonized. To be sure, his character makes it easy. There is no shortage of narcissistic, sexist, or otherwise offensive statements in his repertoire from which to draw. But I have never and will never believe this is why he was demonized. Ultimately, Trump is a disruptor, and his disruption falls squarely against the two key pillars of the American ruling elite's ideology, neoliberalism and neoconservatism. Unlike traditional liberalism and conservatism, neoliberalism and neoconservatism are not opposites. Neoliberalism is just another name for transnational globalization, while neoconservatism is nothing other than the US-dominated global empire project. They work together, two inhuman, anti-human processes that ensure a tiny minority of people control and own all the water, minerals, drugs, GM foods, and everything else worth owning in this world. Hillary Clinton, as the ultimate representative of such an agenda, received unwavering support from all segments of that establishment, certainly from the media. Trump, on the other hand, was vilified. This is because, at least in his rhetoric, Trump showed that he is not a reliable globalist or empire builder. Say what you want about him, but more than once he spoke to hardcore Republican gatherings against the 2003 war in Iraq and the unconscionable destruction in 2011 of the most prosperous and successful nation in Africa, Libya. What George W. Bush did to Iraq, Obama and Clinton, and Cameron and Sarkozy, did to Libya, leaving it in a smoking heaping ruin from which it may never recover in our lifetime. As an aside, I remain astonished at my self-described progressive friends who consistently overlook the obliteration of Libya, all based on lice and greed. The wreck of that nation will forever be a black stain on the careers of Obama and Clinton, and on the legacy of the United States as a whole. So, by Trump not intervening in Syria, he's clearly going against the wishes of some very powerful people who control, as Eisenhower coined, the military-industrial complex. But Trump's decision is hardly surprising, given his clearly anti-establishment stance on vaccinations, big pharma, corrupt science, mainstream media, and more. He is opposing some very powerful people in a lot of ways. Indeed, a lot of his connections are questionable, as are those of his administration, but one point remains crystal clear: he is not a complete puppet, and he is not in favor of several dark agendas that the administrations prior to him were and are trying to carry out. There is no doubt in my mind that Hillary would have intervened in Syria, a move which, the evidence suggests, was the real reason for the chemical weapons attack. So, what can we expect? We can now expect Trump to be vilified even more for the fact that he refuses to go into Syria and intervene. Mainstream media will demonize him for letting people die, and not putting forth a humanitarian effort. Meanwhile, this could indeed be a heroic act, as this could be a move against the cabal, one necessary to prevent these supposed false flag attacks in the first place. That being said, Putin did say that more of these false flag attacks are being prepared, in which case mainstream media will have even more power to vilify Trump for not intervening, but we'll see what happens. Governments within governments, who is perpetuating these attacks if it's not Trump's government? Here's a great quote from John F. Hyland, mayor of New York City from 1918 to 1925. "The real menace of our republic is the invisible government, which like a giant octopus sprawls its slimy legs over our cities, states and nation. The little coterie of powerful international bankers virtually run the United States government for their own selfish purposes. They practically control both parties. And, control the majority of the newspapers and magazines in this country. They use the columns of these papers to club into submission or drive out of office public officials who refuse to do the bidding of the powerful corrupt cliques which compose the invisible government. It operates under cover of a self-created screen, and seizes our executive officers, legislative bodies, schools, courts, newspapers and every agency created for the public protection. This has been expressed by multiple presidents and politicians from within the system, including Trump. To see more quotes like this you can check out these two articles. 15 quotes on false flag terrorism and the secret government that will make you rethink your patriotism. 10 presidents and politicians who told us that a secret government controls the world and what they said. There exists a shadowy government with its own air force, its own navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself. A number of world leaders have also called out this shadowy cabal, with the most recent example being Vladimir Putin. It seems there is a power within the Western military alliance that has completely controlled most politicians. I believe Obama, Clinton, Bush, and many others before them were all carrying out an agenda given to them by this entity. This was made evident by their connections to the big banks and by the level of corporate control over governmental policy when it comes to health, finance, politics, and more. This is a great video clip to further illustrate the point I'm trying to make. Regardless of what you think of him, or what you've been told by mainstream media, Donald Trump has taken a number of actions against this inside group, with the latest being the decision to not intervene in Syria, which could have been a false flag attack carried out by the cabal that currently controls the U.S., but not by Donald Trump. We've been intervening all over the world for a very long time, but this is the first time something like this has happened. It will be interesting to see what happens next. One thing is for sure, we are living in a very interesting time, a time where a massive shift in human consciousness is occurring. Much is coming to light that was believed not to be true, and in turn this is disrupting the belief systems of many. Today, it's best to keep an open mind rather than instantaneously dismiss something that has solid evidence behind it, even if it does contradict your beliefs. This is a necessary step for the human race. We must truly identify the issue here and sift through the lies if we are ever going to find a solution. Seeing truth alone is a big part of that solution. Who knows, perhaps he is part of the cabal, and is simply waiting on the next false flag attack to intervene. Either way, it's probably not his call. Related CE article, is Donald Trump part of the New World Order agenda, or is he really anti-establishment?
That's the news. Join us here every day. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell. See you next time.
This is TBNN.